afternoon, everyone. Welcome, please sit down. My name is Carlos Bosch. I am the head of technology of GSMA in North America, based in Atlanta. Welcome to the eSIM Summit. First, I want to thank Keegan, Core, Lotus Fair, Thales, and Valet for kindly sponsoring this summit. We're going to have a very heavy agenda. I'm going to do a small break halfway, but we're going to have a very interesting summit. We will have 6 keynotes, 1 demonstration, 2 Q&A sessions, and 1 discussion panel. So we want this. Now, before I start, let me show you a little bit about the insights of the markets. This is a slide that GSMA put together. You know, eSIM is at a turning point. We think that we're entering this year in a new phase of scale. And this acceleration that you are going to be seeing next year and going forward, it will be now by the adoption of new services. You know, now that we're going to start to digitize things using eSIM, things are going to get started. Now, I'm going to keep this very short because you came here to listen to the experts. Now, to get started, please join me to welcome Tushar Sachdev, EVP and CTO of Core. Welcome.
Thanks, Carlos. It's a real pleasure to be speaking in front of all of you. How many of you have eSIM technology with you right now? Show of hands. Practically all of you have it because it's in your iPhone, right? So eSIM is the future in my mind. That's where connectivity is going. A little bit about Core, right? Core is we just went public. Thank you. We manage close to 13 million connections now. We operate in 190 countries. We have close to 3,600 customers total. So we help customers deploy, manage, and scale IoT, and eSIM is in front and center of what we do. Some stats, right? The eSIM installation base, and we've seen this for ourselves, but globally has grown 180%, right? And that says the adoption is now just compounding, right? Even with Core from where we were in 2019 to 2020, and now in 2021, the growth is just accelerating, right? The understanding of what eSIM technologies can do, we have a fantastic panel after this to talk about that, is just increasing, and we'll give you a little more insight of what that is, right? 88 million increase in eSIM installations in key industry verticals, whether it's healthcare, whether it's fleet, whether it's assets, industrial, it's just everywhere, right? eSIM is getting adopted. And we'll understand why, right? Why is that happening? And then 94 global eSIM installations are in the consumer sector, which means IoT is just beginning its journey, and it'll grow from there. So a phenomenal set of numbers in terms of what eSIM adoption is and will happen. Why, right? The concept is very simple. The technology is complex to understand, but it makes life simple, right? It's one physical, embedded, iSIM, eSIM. We can talk about some of those standards, UICC, IUSCC, but one physical SIM, one management interface. No more site visits to swap your SIMs. You don't like a particular type of connectivity, you want to switch, no more SIM swaps required, you can do it over the air, right? Sophisticated fallback features, so if something doesn't work in the field, there's no coverage, you can always fall back to something else which is there on the SIM to be adopted. Essentially more profiles within the same SIM. And then that gives you flexibility, right? It gives you flexibility on network technology deployments. It gives you flexibility on what your use case will be and how to adopt that technology. It also gives you insurance, right? At some point you don't like a particular arrangement that you've got, and you want to switch over, it's easy. I thought I'll just go through a customer journey and how eSIM really helps you with that, right? So in the manufacturing stage, the eSIM gets installed in the device, right? Now, eSIM can come in any form. It can come in a plastic form, like all of us know, but it can come soldered on the board itself. It can also come in an eSIM form, where it's a piece of software, a blob that gets deployed. So it can come in various forms, but let's assume it's installed in the device itself, right? A bootstrap profile is then, activated and set ready, right? Then you ship the device to the distributor, to the end consumer, right? And your eSIM is in test ready state, right? Which means when you will not be charged because it's test ready. And when you boot up the device, it's available to you, right? Then your device is powered on, profile switches to the right carrier that you're looking for. Your device may light up in Australia, and your preferred carrier there is Telstra. It will download Telstra and get you going. If it lights up in the United States, your preferred carrier is AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile. It will download the right profile and get you going, right? That's where this is going, right? So you don't need to pre-decide what happens. Your SKU gets simplified significantly, and that's really the power of eSIM, or one of the powers of eSIM, right? Like I said, it's also an insurance, right? Not just logistic simplification, but it's insurance. At some point, you don't like a carrier arrangement, you're not happy with it, whether it's a financial decision, whether it's a coverage decision, whatever kind of decision it is, you can always do the switch over there, right? It also helps you with technology change, right? So as you move from one technology to the other, you can use eSIM to help you either prolong working on an old technology or adopt a new technology if the SIM is configured correctly. So that's the sort of life cycle of how an eSIM would operate, and it's fascinating how this adoption will just completely change the way we look at your traditional plastic SIMs, and especially in the world of IoT, it will have a huge impact, right? A consumer device is much simpler. You can swap out a SIM with ease. In an IoT setup, right, something has been deployed on an oil-filled rig, something is an industrial setup, something is inside of a car, something is on a ship, something is in a trailer, and you want to change that. That's a very, very difficult process, and eSIM simplifies all that because a lot of things can be done. Almost all of the things can be done over here. Every industry, in my mind, will actually adopt this, whether it's automotive, OEMs, logistics, assets, smart energy, wearables, agriculture, home security. Everywhere there is applicability for using an eSIM, right? Because it just simplifies life. Whether you are unlikely to change your profile or unlikely to change your carrier, you can still deploy it, right? Because at some point something may go sour, your relationship may go sour, your pricing may not work out. Whatever happens, you have an insurer, right? It simplifies your logistics, right? You're shipping across many countries, but you don't know where it will end up, right? The device. Then you have the flexibility of doing a runtime deployment of the profile, which will help you simplify your logistics, right? So SKU simplification. I was talking to a customer yesterday, and he said, Tushar, I need SKU simplification, right? Today I have to have 3 SKUs because you're giving me 3 different SIMs for 3 different regions, right? And I have to create 3 different SKUs now to deploy the same thing. Can you give me SKU simplification, right? So we said, yes, now with eSIM we can give you that. So that's really what the power is. There are more innovations happening here, right? And it just doesn't stop at insurance, SKU simplification, logistics simplification. But there is security in the SIM card that can be utilized now beyond what it was meant for, right? SIM security was used to identify you on the core network. Now SIM security can be used to get a certificate with a new safe standard by GSMA, and you can use that certificate to put that to exchange an operational certificate. We can talk some of that in the panel discussion. But now the uses of eSIM are going beyond your traditional model, and that will be even more powerful, right? So we're working on a project with our partners where you can use the power of the SIM secure, do a secure exchange transaction, get a certificate, and use that certificate to not only encrypt your traffic that goes through your device, but also authenticate the device on your cloud, right? That's very, very powerful, right? Imagine every device that's connected to your network needs to get authenticated to your application. And to do that, if you have to deploy certificates at the time of manufacturing the device, it's a logistical nightmare, right? Can you do that at runtime? Yes. Now with the power of eSIM, you can really do that, right? So there are innovations beyond what we know of eSIM to be happening, and I believe this is a fantastic space for innovation. All innovation will happen here in terms of connectivity, right? The innovation was on the platform first, right? One platform to offer you global connectivity. Now the innovation is happening on the SIM. One SIM to give you global connectivity. Right? So that's, in my mind, going to be the next big thing. How do you, one of the things, one of my jobs is to help customers think through the whole process, right? eSIM is not a magic bullet, right? It is magic, but it's not a magic bullet, same solution for everything, right? You have to think through your design, right? I always tell my team, right? Design first, code later, right? You need to think through the design first, right? And we've defined some 5 simple steps to think of a deployment. First, strategy. How will you adopt eSIM? What will you use? What carriers do you need? What country deployments do you use? Evaluate what are my technology options. What do I need as part of that, right? When you say technology, it could be, am I going to use 4G? Am I going to switch over to 5G? Am I going to use this in a certain way? Do I need some security? Those kinds of things. Then define your connectivity requirements. Am I shipping this across the globe? Then I need different connectivity options. Am I going to use a roaming arrangement, right? And is that sufficient for my business? My payload is not that high. I can live with a roaming arrangement SIM. Or will I need local profiles, right? So you need to think through what your connectivity requirements are going to be. Then, very importantly, think of your deployment, right? How does my logistics operation work today? And how will eSIM get merged into that process? Or how will it help simplify that process? You need to think of how your deployments are going to happen, which will again help you through your eSIM journey design. eSIM is not about just adopting a SIM card. It's about adopting a whole life cycle associated with eSIM, which is your platform, how will it orchestrate things, will you update things in batches, will the logic of switching from one carrier to another sit on the device, will it sit on the cloud, will it sit on the SIM itself? You need to think through all that as you are doing your deployments. And then management, right? How will you manage the whole deployment infrastructure? What platforms will you use? What RSP providers will you use? RSP is remote SIM provisioning platforms that allows you to switch from one carrier, one profile to another. How will you leverage that? How will you build the logic for managing that? How will you orchestrate? Will you have to do it in batches? Will you do it one SIM at a time? You need to think through those kinds of concepts as you do this. In summary, we can help you. Our job is to help you deploy, manage, scale your solutions. We do it using connectivity solutions, analytics. eSIM is in the front and center of it. Again, we will not come and tell you buy eSIM, that's the end of the world. We'll help you think through the 5 stages, think through deploy. deployment, work with all of our partner ecosystem to help you. Thank you. And I have two really powerful speakers with me who will join me on a panel. So John Luis, Anna, if you can join me on the stage, we'll have a little panel discussion on simplification of eSIM adoption. So I'll start by just doing a little introduction to the companies. I've done a core introduction, so I'll flip through it very quickly, and then I'll ask John and Anna to do introduction of their respective companies and what they do. And then we'll get into a little bit of discussion on how to think about eSIM, what are the standards coming in, what is security, and how security plays an important role in this. So as I said, I've already introduced the slides, let me jump through it. This is how it works, right? This is how Core enables you to adopt eSIM. It's really all about providing you simplicity, right? The motto of Core is simplify IoT adoption. The motto for me in terms of connectivity is simplify connectivity for our customers, right? So whether you have multiple profiles, we provide it to you on a single SIM. We help you orchestrate that to our platform. And whether it's a SIM from a network operator or whether it's a SIM from a private network, you should be all able to do it on a single SIM, single platform. The orange bar at the top really drives what Core can help you with. Is one SIM, one APN, access point network, one single API, one set of APIs, one platform, and one global contract, right? So that's what we can help you. But John, why don't you introduce Keegan?
For those of you who don't know me or Keegan, I'm Jean-Louis Cara. Thank you, Tisha, for the invitation. And really, I took this spot so I could remove my mask. So absolutely. So Keegan is a SIM enabler. We drive integrated eSIM to be the cornerstone of IoT security. So we're really focused on IoT. We're an ARM company. We're transitioning out of ARM. And we work within the ARM ecosystem to enable eSIM and integrated form factor to really help scale IoT. The goal is to have chip-to-cloud security and to have that in the billions, if not trillion, whenever we can. So I'll be speaking later today, but what Keegan is about is unleashing IoT devices and services innovation so that all this can scale. And God knows there are a lot of issues that need to be removed before it can scale. I'm glad to be among Core and Penti Tech who are working hard to make sure these issues are removed as well. Thank you.
Anna, why don't you talk about Penti Tech? And first of all, let's establish how the name Penti Tech came about.
Penti Tech was created as a play on IoT. Interestingly enough, it started with consumer with a plan of evolving in terms of IoT strategy. But yes, Penti Tech, first of all, thank you to Sharon. I'm Anna Tabajati Bodier. For many years, I worked with GSMA. It's my first time on the other side in a long time. I used to lead the global IoT program for GSMA in North America, and I joined Penti as Chief Strategy Officer in the beginning of this year. And Penti is all about making a transition to a digital journey for operators and MVNOs to be as simple as possible. So it provides eSIM as a service, and it provides also a user interface that allows for a very flexible multi-tenant deployment of services. And it's very focused in taking all the complexities out of launching an eSIM service.
Thanks, Anna. So, John, my first question is, there are a lot of terms being thrown around, right? eSIM, iSIM, soldered SIM, blob. why don't you help us, cut through all that and give us a little bit of overview on what that all is?
Yes, so that's true. There's a lot of confusion flying around. eSIM is sometimes taken as an embedded SIM, and really it refers mostly to the function of the feature that allows it to receive a profile which is downloaded. So basically, rehome a SIM from an operator to another one without having to physically remove it from the device. And we had the old SIM, which became a UICC, but it's really tied to one network. The eSIM is the feature that allows to rehome it, and it comes in two colors because it's always so much better to have choice. You have the consumer one, which is in consumer devices, where you usually rely on the Wi-Fi connectivity to download a profile. And then you have the M2M flavor, where it comes with a bootstrap profile, i.e. it already comes with cellular connectivity coming out of the box. And that's because these devices probably don't have a UI that allows to actually manage that download, or they don't have a user, they're just a machine. So after that, we've added, because all that was too simple, we decided to change the form factor and add one, which we call integrated. And that integrated form factor was adopted last year by huge numbers of voters at the GSMA eSIM working group. And it's essentially the ability now to have the same level of security, but within the system on chip. And with that level of security, still having a SIM or an eUICC OS operating system that runs with the same level of security, but rather than having a separate chip that holds your credentials, network credentials, now you have it within the socket. And we believe that this is going to revolutionize IoT over time, because we're in slow revolutions. But when you look at an LP1 module today, that LP1 module is almost as big, and unfortunately for a lot of makers, almost as costly as a SIM. So it doesn't really make sense to have two separate ICs. And by integrating, we believe that we're really going to unleash a lot of innovation.
Thanks. So I've heard these terms loosely thrown around, and SMDP, SMDP plus. Why don't you give us a flavor of what this consumer standard is, what this M2M standard is, and so on?
So the standards were defined differently, and I think, John, we started kind of touching on how you do the remote service provisioning of each one. They were defined differently because, yes, M2M devices are normally in the field where they might be soldered, you might not have access to them, but they might not have a screen, they might not have a camera, they might not have an OS that allows you to be able to do the download on the device. And so the standards were created differently in order to allow you to be able to differentiate. So the consumer profile, the consumer eSIM relies on an SMDP Plus platform, uses a push mechanism. So the consumer receives a phone, it will scan a QR code or will open an application and do a seamless download of a profile. And they'll be activated. You can have, in most phones, more than one eSIM profile, and you can switch between them. And always powered by the consumer. On the M2M side, it's the opposite. So normally it comes with a bootstrap profile in it. It also means that you can change at any point in time, and normally when you change, you're changing a large number of devices at the same time. So it needs a different type of ability of switching. You don't want, if you have 100 meters in the field, you don't want to go meter by meter and switch the operator. You want to switch them all in one. So it deploys already the connectivity, and then you switch at any point in time.
So let me switch to...
It uses an SMDP SMSR, by the way, so that's the platform. So if you want to do both, you need both platforms.
Okay, let's switch over from the tech world to a more business-focused question. So let's start with you, Anna. What do you think are the barriers to adoption now, right? As these standards are now almost set, maybe they'll merge at some stage. Uh, what are the barriers to adoption in general for eSIM technology? Why will people not just say, okay, I just need eSIM, I'm not going to adopt the standard, we call it USIM anymore?
So I think on the M2M side, I think there's a low list of barriers, but it's a very cost-sensitive market, so cost is one. I think another barrier is you have a lot of device manufacturers that do not want to become a connectivity provider. They don't want to have anything to do with that. So by requiring a bootstrap, it also means that you have to take care of connectivity. So we're eliminating, some of the devices out there that are not really very expensive devices, but end up choosing some other type of connectivity rather than cellular, because the process to get cellular is very complicated. So on the consumer side, one thing I wanted to highlight as well is that most operators, the large ones at least, have deployed eSIM for the consumers, mostly driven by Apple, pushing it and bringing it in their devices. However, they have actually not completed the digital transformation process, which means that most of the things that we should be enjoying today as consumers by using eSIM, they're not available yet. So that's a big barrier as well, which is, it's not just about deploying technology, and I think that's both on the M2M world and on the consumer world. You have to follow through with the, changing how you do things, changing the processes. And I'll very quickly refer to, I went to Portugal this summer and I wanted to get an eSIM from Portugal. Impossible to get it before you land, number one. When you get in and you try to get it, do you know what they do? So issue me a plastic SIM first, then say it was lost, activated, say it was lost, and then issue me a replacement with an eSIM printed on a plastic card, right? So all the benefits that you could be getting with eSIM in terms of cost reduction, optimization, green, climate impact, not happening, right? So I think thinking through how you change things and processes is very important in both, M2M and consumer.
So in this case, the standards are ahead of the adoption, right? So for a change.
Yeah, I think, it's there. It's not just about launching, it's about adoption. Yes.
John, your take on barriers to adoption?
I think a lot of companies are interested in using, for what you were saying earlier. We work mostly on the M2M, and most everyone wants to reduce the SKUs. The companies that have dealt with their own connectivity agreements, they might have 8, 9, 10 different inventories of SIM cards, and it's just a pain. And then when they work with MVNOs, even MVNOs are having the same issues as you mentioned, to have different regional SKUs. So there is definitely an interest in making sure that this happens. Now, the integration costs are pretty high. The barrier, I think, is also in the understanding. It starts with the vocabulary, as you mentioned. But we're not even talking about the same thing to begin with. And then, of course, what everybody wants is connectivity. So they need the connectivity agreements with the MNOs, with the MVNOs. And that is always its own set of challenge. In my view, the technical aspects have always been so much easier than any legal agreements to be had. So that's what we need. It's all these bilateral agreements that are complicated that need to be established. But they are being built, and we don't necessarily see yet that it's happening because it's all in the background. But you know very well I can't do it.
Yeah, and in my mind, I think the barriers to adoption starts with education, right? If we as responsible telco leaders, connectivity, IoT leaders, start educating in the right way what this means for you, what are the different standards, right? Not be open about what we have, what we don't have, what is available, what is not available. It starts with that. Then go through a proper step process, adopting eSIM with the roaming solution whose arrangements in the roaming situation will change suddenly is not going to help you, and then the adoption will actually dip instead of growing. So being transparent about it, educating people about it, getting the right product out in the market at the right time, not too early of yourself, I think will also help this industry drive it in a better way. So that's my take from a outside-in perspective. Is there's a lot of noise out there. There's always a hype curve, like Gartner describes, right? But I think getting the right level of education out there, getting the right set of products behind it out there, and get the adoption done at the right time will accelerate this better and further. It's booming right now. Trust me, eSIM. It's hard for me to keep up the technology requirements in core with respect to eSIM. But go through the 5-step process as you adopt eSIM would be my take on it. So final question on going beyond the uses of eSIM from a pure, I touched on in my keynote, right? There is use of the SIM beyond connectivity, right? I know you are working on some cool projects out there. I know your company is also dabbling with it. So give us a sense of using the SIM security beyond just authenticating it on the core network.
So we've been diving on the SIM security tremendously first to be able to integrate it into the SOC. But I think you're referring to the IoT Safe, which is the GSMA standard application, which allows to leverage the secure IC of the SIM or UICC or eUICC to actually store some keys that can be used to secure the data transmission. What Keegan has announced at the MWC in Barcelona is actually the open IoT Safe. So you have the ability today to implement IoT Safe and just store pre-shared keys, right? And then hopefully distribute those pre-shared keys so that they remain secret and that you're not creating a huge provisioning nightmare for yourself. But what we're going for at Keegan is actually an open IoT Safe that doesn't require all these bilateral integrations to share keys or to download keys or whatever telecom nightmare we've had for the last 20 years, but rather to use a certificate, so a PKI certificate, X59, that is in the SIM at manufacturing, therefore securely loaded as well as the authentication keys, and at the same time using a standard for the enrollment of a secure transport which enables the rotation of that certificate. Because if you think about it, you have all these IoT devices out there, and you're using PKI to secure data transmission. But the private key is stored in the device, not in the SIM. So it's stored in the least secure area of that device, rather than leveraging the most secure area. However, some implementations of IoT Safe are based on pre-shared keys and OTAs, and all that makes it super complicated for anyone to actually be part of that game. So by using X59 certificates and enrollment of a secure transport, you are able at that point to have a bootstrap certificate in a way that you can then exchange for your cloud service provider certificate and have onboard key generation, so that the private key never ever leaves the SIM and not using the SIM. It's very beautiful.
So Carlos will flash the 1-minute warning. Final thoughts: eSIM adoption, ROI. Where do you think it's going? 10 seconds.
Ooh, 10 seconds.
Wow.
So let me just touch very quickly something that I think sometimes we forget. So we talk about when it's consumer SIM activating a new line on your phone, but we forget about private LTE networks, for example. So enabling people coming into the private LTE network to scan, for example, a generic QR code and download a profile to their device is number one, right? Travel. There's an expansion of travel eSIM providers. I think operators and MVNOs have an opportunity to try to capture this market of roaming becoming less something people rely on when they travel. Digital acquisition campaigns. Why not the generic QR code in the airport for tourists coming in? There's so many use cases that if you apply are very relevant both on the consumer side but also on the enterprise market that are complementary to the M2M side. And I think private LTE networks is definitely something really on the rise in the US at least, and quite important, especially with CBRS deployment, right? So I think it's something to look out for.
Yeah, so I would have loved to chat more on that, but I think we're out of time. Final thoughts, this is going to boom. It's there. Adopt it with good knowledge about eSIM and have a good step process in understanding your deployment and how this applies. That would be sort of wrapping this up. Thank you very much, both of you, for participating.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you, Ana and Luis. Great conversation. Now let's change the subject, and now let's go to something different. Let's talk about convergence of services and business enabler. To do that, let's welcome my friend Alberto Hernandez from pave, Senior Vice President of Sales and Payments for pave.
How do you? Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be with you guys today. And more happy, right, to be almost back to normal, to meet people in person. So, even if I'm gonna go, of course, to the eSIM, let's say, evolution. In the world, in different industries, in different applications. I will connect a lot with our colleagues just mentioned earlier. There is a lot of areas of, convergence. But if you allow me, now I'm going to introduce very quickly what we are doing at Valid. So Valid is a company that has been there for a while, investing in different industries. Technology, about 30 years in the telecom space, and we've been developing a lot of technology that we believe today, because of that convergence, is going to help us a lot to support our clients' needs and opportunities. So I will go very quickly, a couple of slides only about Valid, then what is this eSIM evolution, what we are proposing now to OEMs, what is all these concept of secure transversal applications, and finally, partnership we have now with Google and the Strongbox technology. So Valid is having already 60 years in the business. So we have since then we've been very much customer centric, which means nothing else that we are providing the best technology available to our clients. And that's very much our focus all the time. We are not pushing X or Y, but we are very much trying to solve and offer solutions to problems. We have a global footprint, which helps us a lot to understand needs and requirements from different parts of the world, which at the very end also, help us to offer a much wider portfolio of solutions to all our clients. So we have a very strong presence in Americas, also in Europe, Africa, and Asia. And we work with T1s, mid-tiers, and MVNOs. So again, that is giving us the opportunity to really have different type of requirements and needs in terms of, let's say, SIMs or eSIMs. So the products and services we are offering today are mostly SIMs, right? The classic SIM, and that, by the way, these days, as many of you know, so we are going through a very challenging shortage of chips, right? Which is making things more interesting. But we are also since 3 years now developing technology around the eSIM. And mostly, what Valid is doing, our know-how is around secure OS development and correlated applications like subscription management. So we are also having initiatives in the IoT space. We are partnering with different players in the market, and we are very much targeting again mobile operators, MVNOs, OEMs now, of course, device manufacturers, and cross industries like government, with identity, and other different type of services too. So as I was mentioning before, our expertise is technology development around SIMs and eSIMs. So we have more than 30 years doing so. All our center of expertise is in Europe. And we are very active members of the Trusted Connectivity Alliance with other key players in the market. So, but we are also contributing a lot to standardization committees, because again, this is not, in connection with my colleagues mentioned earlier, it's not about developing a proprietary technology, but you are very much working on standardization so that clients are able to have a technology that works every single time the same, independently of vendors, right? Okay, but the topic of the day, the eSIM. So what is happening with the eSIM? Very much in sync with what the panelists mentioned before. So obviously, because of the mobile connectivity, we are having more access to applications and services, and we also have a lot of mobile devices, right, available now. And so we can, have those type of applications, the ones you obviously already hear about. You can do the digital payment, mobile payment at homes, and then you can also open up the door of your car with a digital key. Wearables, more and more, different options, different alternatives. Everything through your mobile device. And finally, just recently, because of the situation we all know, so we are doing a lot of much more remote working, right? But the point is, so at the same time that you are connecting anytime, anywhere, you are generating a lot of data. You're generating a lot of information from consumers and users. And most of that information, it is sensitive, right? So you need to make sure that you are protecting that information, right? That you have ways to secure transactions, to secure data, and that is where the eSIM, on our understanding, makes a lot of sense, right, for all those mobile devices. So, and that is reflected, as Carlos was also sharing with us at the beginning, on the eSIM adoption. It is really growing a lot, and Tushar mentioned that as well. So we are seeing that in our day-to-day. The eSIM now includes a lot of advanced features that are giving us the opportunity to connect much better with all those different applications and services, as we mentioned before. The level of security you have now on an eSIM is much higher than before. And thanks to, for instance, initiatives like the GSMA certification process, right, for eSIMs, that is also pushing, the level of security on eSIM to a very high level, right? And I would like to call your attention to the green dark part of the graph that is showing that because of the level of security of our eSIM technology, we can mostly say now that an eSIM is very much an embedded secure element. In terms of security, very close to that. So that, from a business perspective, is going to help, OEMs, but also solution providers to go for just one single component and not two, right? Which is going to make also a big difference from a let's say, cost-effective perspective. So, okay. What is Valley doing specifically on the eSIM space? We are, again, offering the eSIM technology in partnership with ST. So we are using the latest technology available in the market. And we can offer, as it was mentioned before, different form factors, MFF2 or the WLCSP directly from ST. So the triple code and so on, that people is really used to that, in case you need that particular type of form factor. So we have also a very, comprehensive catalog of Java applets for different type of applications, different type of use cases. Because of the partnership we are doing also with Strongbox from Google, we are also adding, the Keymaster applet preloaded for transversal applications, and we are preloading keys as well, right, on our eSIM. From a device perspective, so we are connecting with the Android LPAs. We can customize LPAs too. We are using standard technology as ISO 7816. And again, because of our strong our partnership to use strong box technology, we have the Keymaster whole technology available too. And finally, from a software perspective, platform perspective, to deal with the eSIM remotely, we are also having our own technology on SMDP+, right? So that we can, do the management of the different templates and storage and manage data personalization and allow users to do the IPP download if needed. So what we are offering again to OEMs right now. So the value chain is different, right? Before we were selling to MNOs. Now for a SIM card, the client is an OEM, right? And obviously it's MNO agnostic. So that is a benefit for the end user, which is good, right? And we are reducing through that technology the cost of ownership, right? So we don't need to invest on all these distribution costs of the classic SIM, right? But I think that my colleagues mentioned that earlier. This technology is having a lot of benefits, but we are not yet able to translate all that to the end user, right? All those benefits. And I think there's still, a gap that we need to work on. And it's not as simple as it looks, but we are, in the right, direction. So an eSIM is subject to personalization. So there is much more things you can do. And our clients, the MNOs, they are now trying to find out how they can connect, right, with all those evolutions in technology and not let everything just in the OEM hands, right, if you will. So one of the topics that is going to be more and more discussed in all those forums is about transversal applications, which is nothing else than having in your eSIM the different MNO profiles, right? But also adding a transversal application layer so that you can have data credentials for keys that could be used for different applications running in the device, independently of who is the MNO or what is the profile that you have running at that time. So that is somehow giving the OEM the independency, right, of running other applications that are not related to the MNO in a secure way and totally controlled by the OEM. So what are some of those examples? Well, we can be, they can offer, the virtual private cloud services to users so that you can connect to that, to the cloud, to the private cloud, and those credentials could be stored into the eSIM, right, in a secure area. Fleet management, so as an employee, you can have access to different applications, different services, and those credentials that belong to your organization are also stored in a secure device. An eSIM is a secure device, and a big difference now, and Jerry mentioned that earlier, is that instead of having private keys stored into the memory of the device, which is not secure, now you have that into an eSIM, right? So now you are going to the next level of security into these type of services. Obviously, you have other type of applications, and even more than you can imagine, to run maintenance on your device, again, without intervention of the MNO, and like other type of applications like digital keys and so on. So there is an infinite number of applications that you can consider now with an eSIM. And again, the value proposition is I don't need to have a secure element and an eSIM too. I can have only an eSIM, and that will help me to already bring security to the highest level, right? And that is, from our perspective, bringing a lot of value to the ecosystem. As I was mentioning before, so we are using Google technology, the Strongbox one, so that is solving a very particular problem, which is where we are going to store keys of the Android applications. So Strongbox is using the concept of hardware-backed technology, right? So and then it's nothing else that what we call a hardware security module, which is a hardware, right? So and the eSIM is nothing else than an HSM working in this type of environment. So that is again offering a very high level of security, but also flexibility, because again you can run different applications independently of the MNO that is running at the time, and everything controlled by the OEM, but also the service provider, if you will. So value offer is very much, in few words, is we are delivering the eSIM technology with the Keymaster applet already preloaded into the embedded USSC. The key is preloaded too. We have the Keymaster hole that should be loaded into the device, into the Android device, and that is going to connect with the embedded SIM. So that is, we are part of the Android Ready SC Alliance, and that is being certified and is working. So we are going to have a mass production for Q1 next year, supporting both form factors, and again, so we are supporting every single solution provider, MNO, OEM that is jumping into this type of projects to to go through all that journey and making sure that they are going to have the service they like with the high level of security that is requested. So again, there is a lot of different type of applications that we can imagine with this type of technology. More and more, we are seeing that identity is one of the things that governments and entities are looking at, and it's not anymore about a physical document, but about a digital one. So, and what is, let's say, what if you have that digital identity stored in your mobile device, and those keys or those secure elements that will define who you are stored into your eSIM component that will allow you to identify yourself at, at any place where they are needing you to authenticate, right, to different services. We are seeing a lot of opportunities in this space. The cryptocurrencies, very much the same. So can we use the eSIM to store private keys and to even sign transactions? Well, that is just happening now. So, and we can add that, additional level of security to cryptocurrencies. Digital keys, we already discussed about it. And also e-money, there is a lot of applications of e-money. And the main concern is how you secure those transactions. You can do that with your mobile device and with that eSIM technology. So that is available, and we strongly believe that that is going to help us to, let's say, boost the usage of eSIMs and combine again the functionalities, advanced functionalities of a secure element plus the eSIM technology as well. So, well, that's all on my side. So. Hello?
Perfect, thank you. Please.
Yeah.
How are you? Thank you for a great presentation. I really enjoyed it. Can I have the clicker for the next? What we're going to do is ask him a couple of questions, being able to go back and forth. I know I didn't it. I apologize. When you and I were talking earlier, my introduction, I said the eSIM market is going to accelerate starting next year. The question, and I'm putting here that everybody can see it, where do you see the market evolving? Mainly in North America, and the good thing is that you can see the entire Americas. You can give us a full perspective where you see that evolution.
Thank you, Carlos. Yeah, so honestly, I see a very bright future for many reasons. First of all, because Tier 1 OEMs, they are betting big time on eSIM, right? iPhone 13 now, eSIM everywhere, right? So, and I think that is going to push the market to the next level. Also, I think that MNOs in the US, they've been early adopters of these technologies. So there is a lot of preparation being done by most of those MNOs in regards of marketing and IT to support that technology. As my colleagues mentioned earlier, there is still some gaps, right? The user experience is not yet the one we would like to offer, but I think again that we are moving in the right direction. And I think we still need to let's say, go through the process of learning with end users to understand the benefits of the technology. But in IoT, don't even need to mention that there is a lot of very interesting services and technologies and vendors pushing for eSIM in the US.
Perfect. Let's go, into opportunities. What opportunities do you think that that eSIM brings to the industry? For operators, we have 3 that deploy in the US. It will be nice to see what do you predict. You see more launching. What happened with end users? Because we see the technology, they're going to see it later, or they're going to adopt it later. Some of them don't even know they're using eSIM today.
Right, exactly. No, I think for mobile operators, it's a great opportunity to have new revenue streams, right? Because instead of having only connectivity, now they can offer solutions, services, and they can partner with other, let's say, entities that are offering applications, and that is a revenue that they didn't have before, and they can now offer through the eSIM technology, like those mobile ID, solutions and so on. So that could be a new source of revenue for those guys. Also, I think that for end users is a nice opportunity to have a smarter way to handle your connectivity, right? So depending on where you are, you can change from one MNO to another without all that hassle of changing your classic SIM card, right? So that is going to help users to have more alternatives and possibilities, right, to manage connectivity. And by the way we see eSIM technology in general is that before for MNOs was only people, right, us using smartphones. But now with IoT, you have like billions and billions of devices that either they are connected right now, they are going to be connected later, but having smart technology like an eSIM is going to allow to put in place new business models of recurrent revenue that could change the entire landscape of this market.
Fantastic. Yeah, you're correct. The decision of services is going to really get users to start using this. Adoption is going to eventually explode. Yeah, I agree with you. This is my last question. But by the way, if you have any questions, I'm going to see if we can put some time in the last one, and Roger's going to kill me now. That maybe I can pass a microphone and somebody asks questions. I see a lot of people here that are experts, and it would be nice to hear from them. The main drivers for use cases for device manufacturers, which is the big thing for them to support eSIM. We have now, I think, almost a dozen, but where do you see this? What will be the driver for them to adopt this beyond the device that are there now?
On our opinion, again, it's like device manufacturers will need to rethink their business of, selling a device once versus selling a device with services that could generate recurrent revenue in the long, in the long run, if you will. So I think that there is a lot of good opportunities to add services to some particular devices that they don't have those benefit of that revenue because they are not able to provide those services to those devices. So with the eSIM technology, that would be a potential opportunity for them.
No, because we have sometimes I want to ask you one more question that is not in the deck. And those services, do you see those being from the device manufacturer? Do you think a better partnership with MNOs? Where do you see that?
Exactly, a combination of both.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that currently many MNOs are working with device manufacturers to develop those opportunities together. So I see that happening a lot. Yeah.
Roberto, thank you. It's been wonderful. I enjoyed your presentation. Thank you for allowing me to ask you these 4 questions. Nice. Alberto.
Thank you.
Our next speaker, to bring things in a different way, please welcome me to welcome Eric Bohem, Vice President of Marketing and Business Development for Lotus Flare. Please welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me okay? My name is Eric. I'm with Lotus Flare, and it's great to be with you today, be back in a live, real, face-to-face conference again. I think we've all missed the opportunity to get together. Our message is very simple when it comes to eSIM. We believe eSIM is here today, and the time for mobile network operators to act is now. We're going to be talking about the market and the business case and the challenges that operators have. And then my colleague Terry will be coming up second and talking more about the product experience, including some demos of the use cases that we've created for eSIM. All right, so as we've talked about, there's, in some of the previous presentations, and Carlos has also mentioned, there's an acceleration in the industry right now around some of the drivers and incentives that are really aligning to bring eSIM to life. And I've highlighted here 4 of those drivers that we see right now. So the first one is the GSMA. So Carlos and the GSMA have done a great job getting the standards in place. And they're predicting that by 2025, we'll actually see 30% of smartphones connecting to mobile networks using eSIM technology. The second is the consumers. So consumers, of course, are prioritizing safety and social distancing when they want to interact with any kind of brand, whether that's a telecom operator or a retail brand. And more young consumers expect a totally friction-free digital way of interacting with the product. In other words, they don't want to call a call center, and they don't want to go to a retail shop to get something done. This is where eSIM can really come in. Third is telecom operators themselves. So a lot of operators today are burdened with the cost of physical SIM cards, warehousing, distributing, paying commissions to the agents along the way. And they also want to acquire high ARPU customers that have eSIM-enabled devices, potentially inbound roamers or domestic customers. And finally, the device manufacturers have really aligned around eSIM, led by Apple over the past few years, that's been embedding eSIM technology into essentially all of their new iPhones and iPads for the past few years. And they've been joined by Microsoft, Samsung, and others. So we really see the incentives are aligning. As they say, software is eating the world, and we have that the physical SIM card is next. So in terms of the devices, whether you pick any category of devices that's out there today, whether it's IoT, laptops, smartphones, and you can see statistics around the growth rate that you're seeing right now with eSIM. So there is a tidal wave of eSIM-capable devices that's on its way into the market. Just to pull out a few of these data points, the number of eSIM-capable laptops is growing by about 75% year over year, and about 99% of all the smart watches and new vehicles are going to support eSIM by 2025. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, Apple has really been leading the charge on this, and you've seen other device manufacturers follow quickly to adopt eSIM and embed eSIM capabilities into their latest devices. So what does the business case for eSIM look like for telecom operators? We talked to a lot of operators around the world, and there's really kind of 4 key drivers in terms of the business case. Number one, if they have an eSIM capable onboarding, they can acquire those high ARPU customers with eSIM capable smartphones and companion devices, such as smart watches. Some operators in Europe are applying a monthly fee of about €5 for the use of cellular service in smart watches, which is generating a substantial new revenue stream for them. Second, operators can reduce the cost of physical SIM cards. There is a cost to manufacture, warehouse, distribute physical SIM cards through the traditional retail channel of dealers, agent, distributors, etc., and paying a markup or a margin to each of those players in the process of selling the physical SIM card. Here, the customers can have that great friction-free digital onboarding experience that they expect using an internet-style product. More and more customers want to be able to pull out an app and get things done within a few clicks, the way they do with an Uber or an Amazon. And the operator that can deliver that to them is going to acquire a significant share. And finally, operators can ride the wave from the OEM community, really led by Apple, as I mentioned, by being the first to market to offer a great digital onboarding experience using eSIM and other technologies like eKYC. But eSIM does bring about some business and technical challenges. We have to be honest with ourselves. There are some gaps today that telecom operators are seeing. So these are just a few of the ones we see when we talk to operators around the world. They have a completely new set of use cases and end user journeys they need to support for consumer, enterprise, MVNO, IoT, activate a SIM, deactivate a SIM, swap a device, upgrade a device. All those use cases need to be designed and supported. Outside of the SMDP Plus and GSMA, there's not a lot of defined standards in the industry for eSIM. And every OEM and operating system manufacturer has their own different way of implementing eSIM. There's lots of different flavors of eSIM out there today. There's new internal challenges around customer care and back-end operations. And the entire landscape, as we know, is changing very quickly. So once an eSIM solution is deployed, it has to be managed, upgraded, maintained, supported continuously to keep up with the changing industry. As we talk to operators, we've created this eSIM maturity model, basically putting telecom operators into roughly 4 different buckets in our perspective, in terms of where they are with eSIM. So at the base, you see no eSIM support at all. This is typically smaller regional telecom operators, maybe operators in emerging markets. They just haven't seen the demand from customers. They don't see the critical mass of device in their base yet. So they have nothing when it comes to eSIM. The second level up, you have operators that have an SMDP Plus that's installed, a standards-based DP Plus that's there, and there's some network support and integration that's taken place. So these operators think they're kind of done with eSIM at that point. Like, we check the box, let's move on. But really, the third and fourth levels are where Lotus Flare plays. So the third level is bringing about that operational support and the orchestration for eSIM, meaning all the complex API calls that take place between the BSS, the device itself, the DP Plus server, in order to enable great digital onboarding for both consumer and IoT. And the fourth level up, the most kind of mature level, is harnessing the power of eSIM to enable a friction-free customer onboarding process, similar to an internet-style product. And that's something we'll talk more about in a minute with Terry. But really, this is, how do you get a new customer to activate on your network in 3 minutes using an app? That's the promise that eSIM holds, and not a lot of operators today can deliver on that. So there's still a road ahead of us here. What Lotus Flare has built to address some of these challenges that I mentioned earlier is what we call eSIM Cloud. It is a fully cloud-native eSIM solution for telecom operators that works with all the standard SMDP Plus servers today. It supports IoT, M2M, consumer use cases. It manages the entire eSIM lifecycle. Integrates with all the different major OEMs, whether that's Apple, Android, Microsoft. It brings those best practices that millennials expect when they interact with an OTT product into the front-end customer journey. Low upfront investment and pay-as-you-grow SaaS model. And it's helps operators get to market very quickly with a very strong eSIM solution so they can have a time to market advantage. Essentially what this does, it enables 3 things for a telecom operator. They can orchestrate, they can acquire, and they can monetize customers. So you can acquire customers by having a great front-end digital customer experience for both business and consumers, or MVNOs. If the operator is providing support for MVNOs, you can orchestrate that onboarding flow, and you can monetize by acquiring higher ARPU customers and really driving a higher NPS score for those customers when they come in through that digital channel. So again, it reduces time to market, it's a full stack solution, and it evolves with the changing industry standards around eSIM. Orchestrate, acquire, and monetize, that's what we're about. So again, our view is that eSIM is here today, and the time to act is now. And at this point, I will turn it over to my colleague Terry, who's going to take us through more of the product experience. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Eric. I was skeptical when before I came. I wasn't sure if anyone was going to show up. So I was talking to Eric, and said, if we were just going to be presenting to each other, we might as well just stay in the office. Anyway, what I'm going to focus on is, Eric talked about the why eSIM. I am going to talk about the what and how. And I'm mainly going to focus on the consumer segment, just because itself is already a very big topic. So we today simultaneously live in 2 different worlds. One which, when we order connectivity from an operator, or when we buy traditional TV service. The other world is the world of Spotify, Netflix, and Uber. Good news is that with the broad adoption of eSIM, buying connectivity and managing connectivity is finally can finally be a 100% digital experience. But how do you actually operationalize all that? Right? It's great promise. There's a lot of promise of eSIM, but there's a lot of complexity when it comes to implementation. Over the next part of the presentation, I'm really going to focus on how do we actually deal with that complexity, and what are some of the different use cases we'll have to account for. Let's start by looking at acquisition. right? Acquisition is a great promise of eSIM. Now you can do it 100% in digital. Nobody has to wait for the SIM to arrive or walk into a store. But there's no one size fits all, right? You actually, in digital, you have to meet where the user is. You have to make it convenient, and you have to make it simple. This is the framework we use when we think about eSIM acquisition. There's the first part of it is discovery point, right? How does the user actually discover your service? Right? This is just an example of some of those discovery points. It could be a digital ad that you run. It could be a referral link that one of your existing users have sent to their friend. It could be a physical QR code that you posted somewhere on a billboard or at the airport. Or it could be a little NFC, little tag that someone scans. So those are all the discovery points. From that point, once the user discovers your service, what's actually the medium that they interact with your service? How do they actually get the service? So there's a bunch of channels there. It could be a website, it could be an app store, and it could be a native app that they download. Or it could be something called an instant app. This is fairly new, or an app clip that's supported by Apple or Google. Then once they are in that medium, how do you actually create a great experience? How do you make sure that it's frictionless for someone to actually buy your service? And then there's actually another slice of this is how do you actually get that eSIM? There's different ways of downloading that eSIM to the device. But I think the key here is that you have to meet where the user, sorry, I'm going to take this off. You have to meet where the user is. For example, if they are on their laptop and they're looking at an ad, it doesn't make sense for them to actually, for you to take them to the app because the app doesn't work on your desktop, right? Now, if you are on the mobile device, it doesn't probably make sense for them to actually get the instant app because instant app has very little friction. They don't actually have to download the app from the app store. So here are some examples of those discovery points, right? Billboards, you can have actually a big billboard with a QR code that someone scans, and then that gets them to purchase connectivity. That's actually a valid QR code if you want to scan it. It leads to one of the apps that we have in the App Store that you can buy connectivity for. NFC tags, I talked about that. It could be a little invite from your friends via email. It could also be a digital app. But again, these are just examples. There are lots more discovery points. Once they are in your channel, they're interacting with your property, whether it's a website or an app, how do you make that onboarding frictionless? So this is one of the apps that we've built. As you can see, it's very simple. You go in. It's a really quick sign up. If you're on an Apple device, you can sign up using Apple ID. If you're on Google, you can use Google ID. It's one click. Payment is Apple Pay if you're not on an Apple device. Again, very, very simple. You select from a few plans that you want that's available. You pay with Apple Pay. And then the last stage is really just about activating the eSIM. Everything is done through the app. So this is just one example of such a frictionless onboarding. Now you're asking, hey, where's the porting flow? We've actually decided to decouple porting from activation because that's a huge friction point for users. You can do porting anytime after. We're going to assign them a temporary number. So again, so you have to worry about all of these different paths. Right? So this is just showing you an example of such a path where you start with a physical QR code. You scan it, you end up with a instant app. And then we take you through that quick onboarding flow. And then you can download eSIM in many ways. It could be a QR code that we send you to your email address. But if you only have one single device, QR code is not a good experience. So there's an API-based activation. And then also Apple has a push service where you actually can push an eSIM to a device. This is an example of, so everything we talk about is, in digital, you can never get the experience right the first time. So you have to really measure your way there. So how do you measure? This is really how we look at it. It's really a funnel, right? Your acquisition is a funnel. How many people end up interacting with your QR code, for example? Right? How many people land on your landing page or your website? And how many people interact with that website? How many people sign up? How many people actually end up browsing your product or pay for it? And then once they pay for it, there's still a drop-off. How many people actually can figure out how to download that eSIM to their device? So we have done this for all of the different paths that's possible when it comes to acquisition. Why do you do this? Because if we actually recommend that you get all of these data points before you scale, right? Because you have limited amount of budget. Where do you put your money? Obviously, you're going to put money in channels where it's more effective, right? So you have to measure your ROI. What is the cost of acquisition, and what's the return on investment for the users that are coming from those channels? So we literally do this for all the acquisition channel and all the different paths, and we produce these ROI models, right? Then, if you have a limited budget, then you can have to look at this and say, hey, which is a more effective channel I want to invest in? The other thing to consider is that it's not just about ROI. You also have to look at the size of that channel. So we see a lot of people, hey, sometimes they're really good channels, affiliate marketing, right? They can get you really cheap users in, but they can only do that for 100 or 1,000 users. The moment that you want to go to 1 million users, the channel is not large enough. So you have to understand, hey, it's not just about ROI, but also can the channel scale? So that's all about acquisition, but eSIM is actually very useful in store as well, right? It's not just about digital flow. We still have storefronts. Operators still have these, physical stores that people want to walk into. Two things here that eSIM can help. One is there are a percentage of users walk into the store and they just have their own device. All they're trying to get is connectivity. For those users, it's actually a much better experience if they just scan an NFC code or QR code, and then there's a really nice, simple flow that takes them through the entire activation process. It's a huge savings for operators. They don't need to have an agent who's serving the user. The other scenario is if someone is actually coming in and they didn't bring a device, they're trying to buy a new device. Even in that case, eSIM is still helpful, right? There's now support for out-of-box eSIM activation, meaning when you unbox a new device, eSIM comes with it, right? eSIM is part of that activation process. So setting that up will also simplify the agent workflow. So now I talked about acquisition, so there's digital, there's storefront. We've got the user in, that's only the first step. Really, how you build trust with the user is not how you get them in, but how you serve them, right? How do you actually support users properly? There's actually a lot of implications when it comes to supporting or account management when it comes to eSIM. Just to give you some examples. Upgrading device is no longer as easy as pulling the SIM card out and putting it in a new device. You actually have to build a flow for that. And then you have to consider, hey, how does it work between OSs? If you're someone going from an iOS device to an Android device or vice versa, that has to be all taken into account. Lost or stolen device. This is actually something that eSIM can really help. If you're traveling traditionally, if you lost your device, you can't. It's hard to get a physical, you can buy a new device, but you can't get a SIM card from your operator. Right? SIM card, eSIM can make that much simpler, that process. Temporary device, some people, sometimes they have a brand new iPhone, they don't want to take it to a kid's party. They want to actually swap it into an older device. Again, you have to build a flow for that. eSIM to eSIM, someone who has a PSIM, they just want to upgrade to an eSIM. Again, you have to support that somehow. It doesn't come for free. And then also there are people who want to actually go from eSIM back to a PSIM. Again, you need to support that. Adding a new line, again, eSIM, you have to take that into account. How do you enable someone, how do you take advantage of the eSIM so that adding a new line is very, very simple, or it's a good experience, it's a simple experience. So there are two scenarios. Again, one, if the new device, the secondary device you're trying to add is actually nearby, then we actually think QR code is a great experience, right? On the primary device, you say, I want to add a new line, you agree to it, and then it generates a QR code on that device, and the second device you're trying to activate can just scan that QR code. Now you have a new line. But what if that second device is not nearby? Right? In that case, there's a slightly different way of handling it. You might want to send a link to them. Or what we talked about, on Apple device, you can actually push a SIM to a secondary device. That would be probably a better experience. Again, all of these has to be supported some way on the back end. Companion devices. Lots of companion devices coming out, these watches are eSIM only. And you have to support them. Right? So there's these additional pieces of services that has to be added. So whether it's an entitlement server or whether that's web sheets, right? All those things have to be supported as part of your implementation of eSIM. you have to think about support as well. So if someone with an eSIM calls into your call center and they say, I don't have connectivity, you want some kind of view of the eSIM status of that user, right? Maybe they made a mistake and they deleted that eSIM profile, that's why they can't get connectivity. Those statuses have to be served up to your support agents. Again, that doesn't come for free. So that's really around managing the account lifecycle. eSIM also offers great opportunity for roaming. There are actually two scenarios. I think some of our colleagues have talked about this one, which is inbound roamers, right? eSIM is a much better way to capture inbound roamers. Imagine this scenario right here, you land and you line up and try to get a physical SIM. That's not what you want. Instead, what if we just had a QR code posted somewhere where you can scan and you pull up this instant app, and that app allows you to buy a local SIM? Wouldn't that be really, really nice? So this is actually an app that we built. It's a traveler eSIM app where that QR code, if you scan, this is actually the app you would pull up. We allow you with a few clicks to buy a local connectivity. So this is the actual app. Again, this is the second scenario around SIM roaming. So the first one is inbound roamers. This one is about, as an operator, if you look at your user base, 70% of your users who, 70% of users who travel don't actually activate roaming service. We call them silent roamers. eSIM allows you to actually monetize these guys. So traditionally, they would just be, they have their data turned off. They don't take advantage of roaming service. Now, if you can correctly identify that set of users, you can actually upsell them local connectivity, right? So what we've actually built is a marketplace where we can aggregate all of the connectivities around the world. We can white label that for an operator. Operator can say, hey, by the way, you are not taking advantage of roaming. We understand that, but hey, here's a cheaper local plan that you can purchase for that country that you're in, right? So this is what we call silent roamer, and I think eSIM can address this particular opportunity that PSIM weren't able to in the past. We've actually done this for some. So this is what it looks like. This could be embedded into the operator's existing mobile app. Right, you're roaming and you get a notification that says, hey, by the way, you can buy connectivity locally. And you pull this up, and if you're in Spain, you see all of the connectivity options in Spain, and you can make that purchase really easy. So we talked about activation, account support, we talked about roaming. You can't forget enterprise use case. Enterprise use case is important. How do you actually, as an enterprise, if you're managing a bunch of mobile devices, how do you manage these eSIM-enabled mobile devices? Work has to be done. Your MDM solution has to support eSIM. Your MDM solution has to talk to the entitlement server, so your entitlement server has to support mobile device management. We added a little module called eSIM connectivity optimization. And what this really is this is taking advantage of the fact that, again, you have the flexibility of switching connectivity provider underneath. So just imagine, there's three things you can do. If your employee or the device you're managing is traveling, you can actually switch them to a local profile, which is much cheaper. Or if you want to switch connectivity provider at home altogether, that is really easy as well. And then the last is that you can actually optimize the plan that they're using, the employees are using. Based on how much they're using, you can actually switch them to different plans. So that's really the power of eSIM. It enables you to optimize spend, not only just enable some of these enterprise use cases, but also to optimize cost. And then the last really is you can't forget your partners as well. The MVNOs that's built on top of the MNO, you want to make sure that when you build eSIM capability, you are building it for them, not just your main brand. We actually run into this quite a bit with operators. They're like, hey, we have eSIM capability, but the moment MVNOs ask, hey, how do we take advantage of it? The answer is no, you can't. So really, build eSIM capability as a base capability, not something that only exists for your main brand. So how do we simplify all this? Everything I talked about. is provided by our eSIM cloud. So I think Eric already touched on this. So Lotus Flare has a eSIM cloud product. And really, it's a way for operators to simplify their go-to-market for consumer eSIM. Everything I talked about, all the capabilities comes out of box. It's really time to market. Can operators build this themselves? I think they can, but then they'd have to keep up with all of the changing and evolving standards and stuff. And the last slide is just if you are set out to implement eSIM for your organization, there are four principles that we follow. The first is really have a holistic strategy. We've seen operators do this piecemeal, and they end up with a Frankenstein IT system. And we've seen that in real life. Design from experience down, I think that goes without saying. Don't build the IT system and then figure out how do I use that IT system to support this experience. It's figure out the experience you want to enable and then build the IT system below. Design for agility. Industry is still changing. A lot of stuff is still evolving with eSIM. Make sure you have a system that's open and that's agile. You can keep up with the changes. And then really the last piece is anytime you're doing digital, you're never going to get it right the first time. You have to have analytics, you have to have data points, you have to measure your everything. And we always talk about, in God we trust, all others bring data. Thank you.
Actually, guys, I've been getting a lot of texts. People are asking me to provide at least a 5-minute break. If you guys don't mind, let's do a 5-minute break. Then we will come back and we will start with Alice, okay? 5 minutes, please.
Use the restroom really quick.
So Ron, I got some downloading some content for tomorrow. Okay. It looks like 2 MP4, they call them loops. I'm not sure what they are yet. And then 1 PowerPoint file. Okay. So I'm working on it. And then we should think about maybe this at 6:30 because I think that's when we're trying to. So if there's some time to be whenever it is at 6:30, I want you to this as much as you can. So you're not, behind schedule 7 and what started 8. So yeah, I wanted to rehearse tonight. I'm like, nice that you showed up, but we're all going home. Yeah, I know. I'm just trying to make this as painless as possible. Ow. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh, your mic.
I can just try to talk to it. think so, yeah. As we were starting, the tomorrow morning session's like, hey, tonight, can we rehearse? It's like, no. Thanks for shutting up. I'm glad you're in the building, but where were you all day? Where were you all day?
Just have a couple more people to get like that, I think.
10-4, yeah.
I don't see them.
No, I understand, yeah.
I guess that kind of makes themselves down.
Hope so. I sure hope so.
You good?
Yeah, I'm downloading content for tomorrow. Here's something that's look at this. Downloading the files. There's two of them. Transition music provided by SPV. Drop down. All I found is 2 MP4 files. I don't know what this transition music is. This is our 8 a.m. session tomorrow.
I'm playing it.
See, I don't know if that's true. We'll see.
You got the part of the meeting, right?
I know. I'm just saying. We'll make do with it. But it's just, you know, it's the music they're providing for the walk-up. Okay, so it can't be very long. All I've got in the folder is 2 MP4 files. I don't know how it all fits together yet. I'm trying to piece it together as much as I can before. I think so. I mean, yeah, the way it was sounding today, that's for sure.
How's the audio?
Is it? Did you switch them off? Okay, awesome.
Maybe that's one of the guys that they cut off.
Really? Oh, so one of the microphones. Okay, thank you.
You want me to play We're Coming Back? It's been 5 minutes already.
You should, but I don't know. I don't see your client.
Oh. It's right there.
Let me check. 5-minute one? Or?
No, it's already been 5.
It's already been 5.
Distinguished guests, may I have your attention, please? Our next session is starting now. We kindly ask you to please take your seats.
Hello, everyone. Okay, guys, let's get started. People are coming slowly. Now, I'm going to do 2 things different. First, I want to welcome Robert Lam, Manager and Business Development for Connectivity at Thales. Robert will be presenting. But I'm going to be putting a microphone in the middle that we can have an interactive conversation, because if you're very intimate, onto the front. The only rule is, please do not touch it. You can come and talk to it, but do not touch it, okay? Well, welcome.
Thank you, everybody. It looks like as soon as I came up here, everybody left the room, so I get this a lot. No, I'm not related to Michael J. Fox, but I'm going to give you guys a good presentation about eSIM tonight. Okay. So today I just want to talk a little bit about how eSIM and 5G paved the way to success with IoT. I think I'm going to have a briefer presentation than maybe some have come before, but hopefully we can get some good messaging out there. So basically, eSIM is a new reality. sorry, I think the speaker notes are too small for me to read here. So basically, we see that eSIM usage in the footprint for both consumer and IoT is just massive, right? eSIM volumes are up 83% year on year. eSIMs were shipped in 2020 and 2021, about 309 million. So that's a lot. 4.9 billion eSIM capable devices by 2025. That's the prediction. So how does that happen, right? Something really needs to change from what it is today to make that happen. And so really, eSIM is here in very large numbers, and the analysts say that it's only going to get more and more prevalent. And I think from everybody that was up here a little earlier today, you can see that that is the case as well. So what's the big deal with this? Is like eSIM is making the network credentials go digital. I think we heard that last from the gentleman at Lotus Flare did a great job of showing just how those acquisition use cases can be a lot different with using the eSIM. And a lot of the carriers, especially the tier ones around the world, are investing a lot of time and effort into doing digital know your customer, digital onboarding, digital credential delivery, things like that. And it's a big change from the old days where you were gated by how much business you could do, by how many retail locations that you had. And so we're seeing up in Canada, there are MVNOs have been enabled up there. And I see several of those MVNOs that are actually signing up customers in advance of putting the network out there. So they're actually acquiring customers digitally before the network's even ready to deploy. And eSIM is a big enabler for that. But basically, McKinsey, they predict that the digital experience is here. Full digital transformation to help mobile operators really double their cash flow. And how do they do that today? It's kind of like, if you think about how mobile operators work with enterprise today, if you're an enterprise customer and you want to do something, they're probably going to send you some SIM cards. Now, they're obviously more advanced folks are using eSIM already, but in the case that you're not, this removable SIM card or physical SIM card is that which you enable business with. You're fueling business by handing this thing off. And with eSIM, it's a lot different. You can still have that same business, but you're going to start it from a different place. And it was a treat to hear from the Lotus Flare guys just to understand that those user experience on the DP Plus side are becoming so popular with the carriers. And I'm a firm believer that this is just going to get more and more, what's the word, cool, practical. It's just going to be easy. And I think when they look back on the ways where, on the days where you had to have a physical location or a retail location to get customers, you just don't have to do that anymore. So that's a great opportunity. And I think carriers in particular are in a unique position to take advantage of the digital identity. So that's the one thing they're kind of giving up on when physical SIM or removable SIM goes, is that it was really easy before for them to keep their customers, hey, come over here, get a SIM card for me. And now when you don't get that SIM card anymore, you can download it from anywhere. Well, what am I doing now? How do I keep hold of my business? So I think it's pretty interesting to think that we see 5G networks coming up, and you've got all these purpose-built devices. You've got consumer devices that we heard a lot about today, and then you've got the automotive devices that use the end-to-end infrastructure at great expense, and the cost isn't really doable there. But now we've got all these 5G networks being built. And the promise there is I can take a purpose-built device that, maybe I have a drone that's flying up and I have some antennas that are pointed up in the air and I have super low latency. I need to be able to create a nice path for getting those devices onto the network as well. It's not just about normal consumer traffic or IoT. It's in the middle. What about the lamp, right? What about the simple sensor that's supposed to cost $8? If you're going to point that thing to the SMSR and the SMDP, it's going to cost more than $8. And so the idea here is, if you can create these power-on activation use cases, single SKU. I heard that a lot today from almost everybody that talked today. People see single SKU. It's like, hey, I'm an OEM. I don't want to homologate for every different region. I want to build it once, and I want to be able to fire that guy up. And as it comes on, boom, it goes where it needs to go, and it does what it needs to do. So that includes your scalability, your security, your data protection. These are all things over here that an OEM or an enterprise customer who's considering building business on top of eSIM, they have to solve all these problems. And I can tell you, over on the right side, it's even more important. So now I'm a carrier, and I'm giving removable SIM cards out. Now I don't do that anymore. I can get my EUICC from some vendor, I don't know who, but what's the thing that I still have? I still own the identification. The PKI infrastructure that we heard about earlier, and basically the claim that you can make that the eSIM chip is the same chip that goes into credit cards, which companies are super easy to do business with these days because they go through eKYC and they know who the customers are. So if I'm gonna go to a website I've never been to before, and it says, what would you like to sign in with? Do I want to use one of these big entities that never sends me a bill? Or maybe I want to use my mobile network operator and use ID as a service for that MNO. eSIMs put the mobile network operators and the OEMs in a position to really control the SIM part of it. In addition to that, you need connectivity. I hear connectivity all the time. I mean, you talk about end-to-end, where you have a bootstrap profile, and that gets you up and running. You talk about consumer, where you can point it at a Wi-Fi, and you can get that up and running. I heard some of the different use cases where eSIM is basically breaking roaming, because now instead of entering into an agreement with one big carrier and driving across the US, I can have regional deals with each carrier as I go across, and I can get a lot better deal. But that's hard now. Now I have to be able to figure out when it's appropriate for me to switch to the different networks. Is that based on quality of service? Is it based on price? Is there some kind of a geofence? It's very complicated. The eSIM and the transversal security domain that's down low really provides the opportunity to look at the collection of profiles that are on the device and maybe move to one or the other. Now that's the part that the standards don't really address that well today. I'm sure it's going to come, but when you're talking about massive macro networks and you're talking about virtual private networks, some of these private networks are being built by the big tier 1 customers, right? Or big tier 1 companies. They want to build private networks for enterprise, and they want to use that as a new method of generating revenue, which is perfectly okay to do. But when they're going to do that, they have to be able to solve these problems. And I'm an old wireless guy. I've been working on system acquisition and determination in eSIM since back in '98 when I started out at Sprint PCS, which nobody cares. But anyway, it's been quite a journey. And but anyway, every time we have a new G, these problems or these challenges come up over and over again. How do you identify who's coming into your network? How do you connect them easily with no friction? And then how do you protect them once they're connected? And that's really what we think the eSIM is all about for. And then so for OEMs, we've got low footprint, single SKU, a lot of flexibility for them to be able to do their manufacturing and distribution. And for carriers, we've got additional connectivity methodology. We have additional features that you can picture, just like I talked about, where you're handing in the networks or out of networks, depending upon what you need to do there, and deploying hardware-based security features. And I think I heard this a couple of times. IoT Safe is a very big initiative through the GSMA. Thales is very cooperative and pushes that standard quite a bit. I think we were right there with Kaigan doing kind of the same thing, and we're getting awards for it and stuff like that. But the idea here is, if I can't control the business with removable SIMs like I have been for a long time, and I'm worried about my customers leaving, well then how about providing identity as a service? How about providing seamless connectivity, know where you want as a service? Or how about protection that's scalable at the hardware layer? I mean, those things are problems that every enterprise that wants to build on 5G or private networks is going to have to solve. So if you're an operator, a mobile network operator, if you can solve these problems for your big enterprise, they won't do it themselves. They won't create a fragmented environment where this point solution or that point solution is there. So we believe that the SIM technology to secure the identity and that the connectivity and working with the MNOs and the hardware-based security is really the way to fuel the enterprise business. So I think that's about it for me. One thing about Thales, I didn't want this to be like a super thing, but interesting thing about Thales, we have 200 plus subscription management platforms globally. We have GSMA certified scalable cloud. We do eSIM chipsets, eSIM enabled modules. We're really promoting the trusted digital telco where the digital ID can be offered as a service to to drive new revenue for the carrier customers, and orchestration and digital BSS. I think a lot of the people that you've seen out here today are talking about these challenges just like I am. And then for private networks, it's not like it's going to be a lot different than having a single private network where you have some massive enterprise that's trying to run robots, right? What are you going to use when you have a private network at a mall and you've got a bunch of consumers that are coming in and they just want to get on that private network? You know, hey, I can scan that QR code and my family can as well. And then when my daughter runs off the other side of the mall, I know where she is because it's this vertical that's been created up on top of the private networks. Those types of services can be built easily on eSIM. I think the biggest thing about it is you don't need a brick and mortar store. You need a digital storefront, or I think the lowest fair presentation where you have the points where you access the customers. Those are all important. And I echo what I've heard from several people today, which is think about the user experience, think about how that should go and what's best for the consumer, and then kind of come in and try to build backwards from there. Okay, now I'd like to go ahead and invite up Will Egner from Axon. They partner with us to do some pretty exciting stuff, and I'll let Will tell you about that. Thank you.
We're only 8 minutes. Okay. Let's see here. All right. Well, am I like the last speaker? No. Good. That's good. So I wanted to speak and I want to thank Thales Group for inviting me up here to speak about it, because I'm not the eSIM technology guy. I'm more the wireless strategist now. So I give you the wireless strategist perspective from an IoT OEM perspective, right? So I don't know how much you know about Axon. We'll kind of hit that on a couple of these slides once we get going here. And so we can get the first slide. Who's doing the presentation? Okay. Again, thanks for everybody inviting me up here, Thales Group and a couple other companies that work with it globally. But I want to talk a little bit about there's two types. I think we heard today there was two types of eSIM technology out there, right? There's one is really around the consumer, the phones, where you have the barcode and you're scanning. The other one's around IoT and embedded SIM, and that's the one I'm going to be talking about. And then we're going to be talking about the challenges of that as we go through that and try to scale a business globally, right? One of the things you may know is you probably have been on the streets here in LA, and you've probably seen about 15,000 of these devices out there. Has anybody seen these body cameras walking around the streets here in LA? Yeah, LAPD is one of our biggest customers, New York PD is another one. All those devices that are walking around here, all 15,000 here in LA, they're connected, and they're connected using a couple technologies. There's an eSIM in here, and there's also a physical SIM for those countries where we just can't get the eSIM working fast enough, right? 2 SIMs in here, Category 4 modem, 200,000 devices deployed in the last, just in the US market, in the last 3 years. We're one of the fastest growth in connectivity of any new category device. We have now approaching 60% attach rate of the cellular LTE service. And I'll just talk a little bit about that as we go along here, but major success. Our company is probably, if you know Axon, it was a $2 billion company when I joined 4 years. It is now a $10 or $12 billion company. So it's tremendous growth in this space, and want to thank. And so we're trying to take this device that we have 200,000 devices here in the US and bring this device to countries like Brazil. Like this year alone, in Brazil, we sold over 10,000 of these devices. The last 7,000 have been attached. How do we get the attach going fast? So this is an exact challenge that we have. How do we connect these devices efficiently and fast, right? So let's go to the next slide. Just a little bit about, hit the company for a second. So Axon was known as Taser. So Tasers are in the market for about, first slide. Next slide. Been in the market for about 25 plus years, right? Founded in 1993 by a couple gentlemen, Rick Smith and a couple others out that want to basically eliminate the bullet. That's one of our big audacious goals, is to try to eliminate the bullet using tasers, which are non-lethal weapons. Shortly after we launched that company, about 10 years, 15 years later, realized that there's a lot of need for capturing video evidence around interactions between citizens and public safety agencies to help better capture the truth and manage that. Today, for example, our company stores about 10 times the amount of data that Netflix has in video evidence in the cloud. We're one of the largest providers of storing of video evidence in the US with Azure, which is the Microsoft network, right? So we're growing tremendously. So how do we manage this flow of evidence? So we have these devices that are body cameras. We launched Fleet 3 product, which is going to allow us to collect video evidence around the car and things around traffic stops and areas such as license plate detection. We're using AI in that space. And now the biggest thing we're finding where the most aspect that really attracts customers to us is that we have all this video evidence. How do you manage that efficiently? How do you flow that video evidence through the process of capturing it with our public safety agencies, bringing it to back to the detectives to process, and then working with the people that are going to enforce the law and enforce the laws, right? So flowing that in the judicial system, that whole flow process, it's a massive business to be in. And we're working to work on the entire workflow of that, and how we do that. So next slide. So one of the first things we did is when we launched about 3 years ago, is we created a new, because of the last camera, right? So this is the body camera I showed you, right? The last camera we had was an Axon Body 2, did not have LTE connectivity. It was only Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and it would do some tethering to phones, stuff like this. Actually has independent category 4 modem we talked about, right? How do we get the carriers, to partner with us on it, to embed this? We're like the first company on the planet to have created an ecosystem with AT&T FirstNet. So we're the first company to be in that system. We are the largest device company on the AT&T FirstNet network. We're also a very strong partner with Verizon in the US market, and we're growing that. But what are the things you can do with this now that you have, when you start out traditionally, the workflow of these things would be, you go out, you charge it, you dock it, you actually offload all the video evidence, you pull it out, it's fully charged, officer goes out the street, collects video evidence, and then they come back at the end of their shift, and there's a docket, and then the actual data flows up and they process it. With the connected device now, a couple things happen. One, there's a situation where officers can be monitored in the field, meaning they can be folks that are in the back office can see what's going on without the actual officer communicating information, because they have this rich visualization of what's going on. So they can do what they call live stream. They can also take that evidence that they captured in the last 5 minutes. Like for example, if there was an incident where there was a lethal force used, they can actually press a button on the right and they transfer up all the video evidence in the next 5 minutes to the cloud and be able to process that and take actionable policing activity. So tremendous acceleration in the actual workflow for public safety. The thing that's really incredible about this is, right, it also helps you with the lifestyle. As we went into the COVID era last 2 years, a lot of these officers didn't want to go back to the office, right? And they wanted to, but you needed to go back to the office to dock. Well, now we could actually just have all this video evidence transferred over the LTE networks up to the cloud without having them to come back to the office. So time saving. So a lot of cool things that were developed around this. Folks didn't think this was going to really take off. Like I say, we have about 140,000 connected devices in the US, and there are more than 20,000 live streams of the police officers in the US each month right now, and that's just growing rapidly. So there's a rapid takeoff on this. The question is, how do we take this technology, which is really more about this eSIM now, how do we take this technology that's been super successful in the US? We have 70% of the US market, and grow this to a global business without, as you were saying, pulling this apart. First of all, you don't want to pull this apart because it's waterproof. It's got all kinds of optimized tuned antennas in it, very compact. You pull this apart, it messes with the whole performance of the device. It's got to be embedded. We embed up front, either like I said, an eSIM, or we have a pluggable 4FF. That's going to be done in the factory to create data. How do we take this and scale the business now? So we're talking about, again, the industry side, not the consumer version of eSIM. How does that work? And what are the practical challenges of doing that, right? So next slide. So, and as we talked about, there's obviously location services here that we can do as part of this. This is a situational awareness view, right? And this is a mock-up for like 100 people, 100 different officers deployed. We can click on each one of them and see what they're doing in different areas. Just to give you kind of an example, this is a real one. Hit the next slide. This is actually operating, right, in one place where you're live operating the camera, you got all kinds of information on the license plate, and you have the location where the officer, this is, like I said, the system is live in the US, and we're actually just growing, like I said, internationally now. How do we handle that? So this is a very useful tool that helps, again, in this whole acceleration of that workflow for public safety agencies. How do we take this, next slide, and grow a global business now? And probably like a lot of, is there a lot of IoT companies in this room right now that are operating like IoT connected devices? How many do we have here? Okay. So it's a Herculean effort to go out and go engage 15 or 20 companies around the globe and go work with your legal departments to set up commercial contracts with all those and figure out how do we manage and then the first stage we did this, we had 2 or 3 different regional modems because of the fact we couldn't go our device is so compact. One of the things is it's smaller than your average smartphone is 130 millimeters. This thing's 65 millimeters. So we have to pack as much into this as we can in terms of the modem has to be small and compact, so we have to take bands out. So we had a regional device. How do we grow that business? Well, we started out, and it's like a bittersweet story. It's like we started out, we thought, like, we had the vision. We're going to do an eSIM in there, industrial eSIM, and we're going to go and switch this from each of these countries. We're going to switch this from like, for example, we have a regional solution in Europe. We're going to switch this from Deutsche Telekom into Orange, or we're going to switch this from Deutsche Telekom into BTEE. Oh, that should just work, right? This whole industry is ready to do this. I mean, I remember 4 or 5 years ago, and like I say, Ericsson's been a tremendous partner of us. Ericsson with their Ericsson IoT accelerator. But how do we get those? The really problem is not that the technology is not there, but how do we get the carriers to cooperate to do this? This is really the problem. It's not a technology problem. Every single one of these guys that you can talk to, you talk to the sales team, you talk to the Cisco JS, we talk to DCP teams, all this is possible. It's how do we motivate these different groups to work together to deliver the dream of having this switchable SIM between these markets. So as an IoT customer, I'm sure Robert's brought this up when he came up here, IoT customers don't have a ton of cash to go and set up all these different relationships with carriers, right? So, and also not only the relationship, but then the technical interfaces you need to do between this, the SMSR, which is the router function, and the actual, the localized carrier SMS, right? Component, right? Which is which controls that profile for that particular carrier. So all that work has to be done. So over the last 2 years, 2.5 years, Axon has expanded our connectivity partners, but the reality of it is, it's still, I would call it a work in progress, to be kind, right? In terms of getting these carriers to work together and getting partners. So I think I come to you today saying that, one, the IoT ecosystem is not there this is on the industrial side to really fully make this easy, like an easy button to do, right? So there's got to be more cooperation between carriers and between like maybe neutral parties like Ericsson or Jasper and SIM technology groups to make this work well, right? And so here's where we are. Here's our partners that we have globally right now in this space of carriers. But again, it's a really quite a bit of effort. I would say just kind of when you're calculating your formula, and it may vary, at least $100,000 in cost per carrier. And that's not with us doing everything, that's with our partners helping us. Easily per carrier kind of set up fees, just to do the contracts, to do the certification with the carrier, and then to have our partner do some lift in terms of our partner doing things like setting up the interfaces between the carriers, like the carrier profile, the local carrier has a profile and this router, right? That interface, right? And then then we have Another thing that I want to bring up is because we're in the public safety space, right? We have requirements from our customer to locally break out the network there. Meaning, even if we have a carrier, they have to break the actual internet out in that country because we have a data sovereignty issue, right? So now we have the situation where for example, if we're working in Brazil, for example, we just got the state of São Paulo, which is like 10,000 devices. All that data for that agency, and that has to stay within Brazil. So we have to have it break out locally, we have to have the evidence stored locally. So you can't do that, by the way. You cannot do that with a roaming SIM. It's not possible because now you're tromboning to some other, like say I roamed into Brazil, which wouldn't work. It wouldn't work for Brazil anyway because there's so many roaming policies. But say I roamed into, say, Thailand, for example. I roamed into Thailand. They still may want, even if there is no data sovereignty issue around enterprise networks, they would still want the public safety agency would still want that data broken out in that particular market, right? So there are those restrictions. So roaming will not solve that problem. And then there's this localization that's required that, is not really, it's still quite expensive, quite frankly, for IoT OEMs, and needs to be repaired. So here are some of the things, and this is what I'm going to hit on this last slide. Here are some of the things that we needed to talk about, right? So the lead times, right, for doing actual carrier contracts, are typically, because back and forth with the lawyer, 6 months in the doing, at least, and they could be longer, right? And making sure that you work through all the requirements around venues of law and so forth, right? On that, there's this whole thing about how many resources does us as an IoT company have to divert to this, right? So really, it would be really a lot of use if we could find a couple different groups that could do things like this shared tenant kind of solution around eSIMs, right? Where we share the cost of the localization with multiple other OEM customers out there, right? So that's a key thing. And then the question, another question is, you have two carriers, I just give you some real examples. British Telecom uses Jasper platform. Deutsche Telekom uses uses DCP, or what we call Ericsson IoT Accelerator. Getting those two platforms to work together to allow us to be able to, switch and localize in those markets is challenging, right? So there's this, we don't really have a single pane of glass right now, so it makes it difficult. Now, so what I have to do, we have 5 people working on LTE services globally right now, and they have to go out and learn these different platforms. They have to learn the Jasper platform. They have to learn the Ericsson IoT platform. They got to learn, by the way, then there are other carriers, some of our carriers, partners, which are great partners, they have their own proprietary IoT platforms, right? So this is a ton of proliferation around just managing that device aspects and switching between these different markets, and the fact that they're all represented differently, right? And so those are key things. And we talked about data sovereignty. I get about that, right? You gotta make sure when you're in a different market that you understand what the data sovereignty requirements are, and you have to break out. How do you do that? I think there's work around that where the IoT platform can break out that market, or you have a breakout, but you have to have infrastructure to do that, right? So anyway, I'll stop there. Is there any other questions around the challenges of transforming this industry and connecting these body cameras? Yeah. Anyway, I think we don't have time for questions, though. But super challenging. I just want to bring this out. Hopefully there's people in the audience that are working on this and can help other needy IoT customers like myself help scale our business faster, because we really want to make this industry like we think we easily could get to 2 or 3 million with our business between the body cameras, the fleets, and even smart weapons. How do we have other IoT companies come into this, right, and say, okay, I got 3 or 4 million devices. How can I click through and utilize the carrier infrastructure and all these technology partners to make this easier to grow the business? That's where our challenges are yet. So anything we can do to make that easier would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Robert, and thank you, Will. It was very interesting, actually. I enjoyed it. Now, we have an internet group for the next panel. I would like to make it interactive. I put a microphone there. It's sanitized, I guess I could. Please don't touch it, just you can speak to it. To do that, we will have 3 presenters. And what I want to do is bring all the 3 presenters, make it interactive. And I can ask questions, or you guys can ask questions. First, Jean-Louis Carrara, from Keegan. He did it. Please. No, okay.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, everyone, for making it until this late hour in the day. I'm Jean-Louis Carrara. I'm a representative for Keegan in the Americas. And when my slides show up, I'll be able to start the speech. And a little bit awkward, but so Keegan. Oh, I have the clicker. There you go. Okay. Yes, thank you. Okay, so disruption and evolution. So my speech is about disrupting the SIM industry. Keegan is a SIM enabler, and we work within the industry to enable the distribution of profiles. So I'm going to explain a little bit further what I mean by that. And please don't leave. I'm barely starting. So the SIM industry is being disrupted twice. The first disruption is actually coming from an industry which was provided by SIM manufacturers. And those SIM manufacturers buy the chips, they have their own SIM OS, and they make a final product, which is shipped to traditionally MNOs. Now, this industry is being changed because of the eSIM functionality, particularly in the consumer environment. In the consumer environment now, it's actually a device maker which buys the chip, and that chip maker, that secure chip maker, is licensing the SIM OS, the eUICC OS. So you already have turnaround where the provider of the secure IC chip becomes the main provider to the device OEM. And we have now a second disruption, which we have to say that Keegan was really behind, is the integrated eUICC. So we're moving one step further in the integration of the SIM. So we're familiar with embedded SIMs, which some people call eSIM. The embedded SIM, or the soldered SIM, is basically a SIM which you can't remove from the device. That is mostly for IoT use cases. In these IoT use cases, the big issue, however, is once you have soldered your SIM, well, how do you replace the SIM? And you might want to replace the SIM because your vehicle might be shipping to a different area. So now you need to rehome it to a different MNO. So the industry worked and standardized for now over 10 years this eSIM functionality so that we can rehome a SIM which is soldered. But we thought, well, if it's soldered, then why don't we go one step further and integrate it? So now, once it's integrated, it's really the cellular SOC providers which are licensing the SIM OS, integrating the SIM OS, and putting it on the SOC. So we have this second disruption happening. And really, the reason we're having all these disruptions is because who wants to deal with SIM cards? Nobody wants to deal with SIM cards. Even consumers don't want to deal with SIM cards. And now, thanks to some OEMs, they become so small, they're very difficult to manage. So we had this little pin to open the tray, and then we have to almost use tools to be able to switch the SIM. It's becoming ridiculous. And with multiple form factors, chances are you don't have the right form factor anyway. So nobody wants that on the consumer side. The IoT service providers really want to provide connectivity. They don't really want to deal with SIM cards. And most of them are tired of having an inventory of multiple SIMs, each per MNO. The MNOs don't want to deal with SIM cards either. They just want to sell connectivity. So the SIM is just, you know, an extension of the network, and they need to have it to secure access to the network. So nobody wants it. So if nobody wants it, really, why do we have it? Right? So it's just historical. And eSIM helps reduce the SIM inventories, right? Now you're dealing, if you look at the IoT value chain, you go from the SOC, the module, to the contract manufacturing, to the OEM, to the IoT service provider. Right? And maybe his value chain is not perfect, but at least that's what I was able to put together. So in my view, it has some value and explains my point. The contract manufacturer today, we get SIM cards of different form factors, but mostly from different MNOs. Right? So you have the triple cut, and they're going to ask you for a special form factor to keep in their device. And when we go with eSIM, we integrate further into the supply chain. Now we can mount or assemble, solder an embedded SIM directly into a module. And that's already progress in terms of integration. You can go and integrate. So you've seen some modules coming up with a USON type form factor under the hood. You've had a lot of trials like that. You even had companies that try to make it a soft SIM. Right? Now, I'm very cautious when I hear about soft SIM because I've been in this industry for a long time. Nobody wants to put their authentication keys in something soft. Just the name itself is going to kill it. So call it at least a hard software SIM, if you want, but don't call it a soft SIM. And at the end of the day, it's not really working. I mean, you need, or the MNOs need that security. They need to know that they're putting an extension of the network in something which is secure. So what we did is that we work for the SIM to disappear from inventories, to integrate it completely into the SOC. But keeping the same level of security, that means dealing with, nobody wants to deal with that really, but we have to. Dealing with the secure IP that needs to be integrated into the SOCs so that you can have an integrated tamper-resistant element which can now host that EUICC operating system. So this has been coming around, and this integration, I mean, you can have multiple numbers here, but the numbers that we've found on some implementations is gain on the power management, because you remove the SIM chip, so you don't have that SIM chip anymore. You have a module, or rather a SOC, that has an integrated tamper-resistant element. So the power integration, power management can be much better, can be optimized. Of course, it's much smaller than SIM because it disappears. It's less than a millimeter square of silicon. That also reduces the bill of material, reduces tremendously the space because it's gone. And you have a performance enhancements because now you're directly within the SOC. So you have a lot more compute power than you have in the secure, traditional secure ICs, the SIM cards or EUICCs. So these are some of our measurements. I'm sure as the industry matures, we'll have more, and it always depends on the SOC, and it always depends on the implementation. So this is just to give an idea. Let's put it that way. Now, when we look at what I just said, the disruption of the industry and the fact that MNOs don't want to necessarily deal with SIM cards, we looked at the MNOs which are already out there. And the MNOs which are not necessarily interested in warehousing SIMs and will let their customers buy the SIMs directly. And one of such MNO has been AT&T traditionally for a while. So we entered with them an agreement where we add flexibility. If you want an AT&T SIM, you don't really want an AT&T SIM, you want an AT&T profile. You want an AT&T connectivity profile. And you can come to Keegan and you can get that. And you deal with AT&T on the connectivity agreement. That's not something we're involved in. But we will help with making sure that the technical integration is set so that you can have an AT&T profile. So that's what we came and we announced in August when everybody was on vacation, because we wanted to make sure it remained low-key. But since the US never sleeps, I think a lot of you might have picked that up. And now I'd like to bring two of our partners, Nick Taluja, if you would like to come, and Henrik Flodell also. So Nick is with Sequence and is going to speak to us a little bit about his integrated EUICC implementation, and then Henrik will do the same a little bit later. Whoa. Sorry for that.
So just so you guys know, who is Sequence, we're actually a chipset manufacturer that's we are a chipset manufacturer, or so-called SOC, as Jean-Louis was stating. We actually build our own chips from ground up, and more than that, we're actually a module solution provider. So we actually are fully vertically integrated by providing chips and modules to the IoT landscape. So we launched our Monarch chip, which is our first generation Monarch, about in 2016, our first CAD-M MB1 chip. And what we realized is the entire market was very, very fragmented. What we realized is the thing was extremely complex from a customer standpoint to implement. While our system, we gained a lot of market share and traction with our original Monarch, when we decided to bring our second generation Monarch chip, the Monarch is our LTM NB-IoT chip. And when we decided to bring the second generation, we decided that we wanted to do things a little bit different. We wanted to add a few things in there that would make the connectivity aspect, that would make the integration aspects for the customers very simple. Jean-Louis mentioned some of the things that are important to our customers, which I'm not going to repeat, but the one thing I will say is some of our industrial customers were actually going out and actually swapping SIMs in and out. Okay, so they had significant amount of trouble with that, not from the perspective of the SIM, but one, they had major quality issues, because you can imagine taking SIMs in, pushing SIMs back in, they were actually having failures in some of these devices. So for them, the aspect of the SIM being integrated was actually helping them reduce the quality level. And for them, the truck roll of this quality in terms of getting things done was significantly high. So we see actually an increased quality when it comes to this. So in our Monarch 2 chip, what we've done is we've actually taken an IP and we've integrated a secure element in there. The secure element is an EAL5 plus highest grade encryption that is possible today. And the chip that we sampled last year that is now in full-blown production and certified worldwide is available. That is our Monarch 2 chip that integrates a secure element using the Keegan SIM OS that then becomes our embedded EIUICC or eSIM as we call it. The Monarch chipset, as I said, it has some of the world's greatest power consumption. We actually are designed our chips a little bit differently. Our focus is mostly on power consumption. What we focus is not on voice applications. We're never going to be part of the smartphone, or at least till I'm alive. I don't think we want to be in the smartphone business. But our chips are optimized for IoT. Well, IoT applications require the lowest power consumption possible. So with that, the integration of the SIM has actually helped us achieve that and achieve the goal of getting our customers even further power consumption improvements, not just from the chip perspective, but now we're starting to look at the system aspects and things like that. So obviously the EALU5 plus secure element has helped us in that area, and now with Keegan we're working on the UICC to get that, and will be implemented and realized within the coming months to maybe 4 months. We will have our first profile available and sampling to the market.
Thank you, Nick. You want to stay with us while Henrik presents, and then we'll have questions together. So if you have any questions, you
Carlos probably has a few prepared, but otherwise there's a microphone here, so you can feel welcome to just ask us directly.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Jean-Louis. Thank you for sticking with us, everybody. I know that it's late today, and we're probably keeping you away from whatever you have to do after the show is over. I just want to also provide some background to what we're doing at Aleph Semiconductor, and especially what we're doing together with the Keegan team. So Aleph Semiconductor was founded about 2 years ago, but it wasn't really until September of this year where we went out and made our first product announcement to the market. We are a supplier of SoCs that essentially integrate a platform for realizing a complete IoT design in a single chip. The reason that we started out was that we're seeing how the IoT devices, you know, this mass adoption of IoT is sort of starting to gain ground. But we realized that there is a need for something that has a much higher level of functional integration, so that the OEMs that want to create these kind of solutions don't have to go around and source various functionality that is essentially required for IoT piecemeal. We want to be able to provide essentially a one-stop shop for a complete IoT system integrated in silicon with excellent power characteristics, strong security, and connectivity built in from the ground up. So what Aleph announced about a month ago are our Ensemble and our Crescendo family of microcontrollers and fusion processors. We've designed these devices on an architecture that spans from a very high efficiency single MCU core device up to very high performance devices that integrate both MPU cores and MCU cores, imaging peripherals, HMI capabilities, all the things that you need to create complex IoT systems. And we also, when we did this, we were kind of looking at what are the requirements for the OEMs that are designing these type of devices. What are they looking for? And of course, low power consumption is one thing. Small physical footprint is another thing, which is why we, in a very early stage, decided to partner with Keegan to enable the ability to integrate the SIM into our chip as well. So this has been built in from the beginning. Of course, we have the ability to run an external SIM, but we're seeing a tremendous interest in our families of devices because we can do this deep level of integration and essentially reduce components and remove all kinds of potential supply chain obstacles for our potential customers.
Thank you, Henry. So if you would like to take a seat, I'm going to spend a few minutes on IoT Safe, and then we can take questions. Okay. So, are you all familiar with IoT Safe? I know we mentioned it earlier today. I'm not exactly sure. So, okay, so I'll just say a few words on it, and we'll continue. So IoT Safe really comes from the realization that most companies want to secure directly the data from chip to cloud. And there is a breakdown today in the security of that data transmission, where the keys are stored in the device rather than in the most secure environment or in a secure element. Since IoT devices cannot afford to have secure elements, they have, however, the ability now to leverage the secure IC integrated or external in the SIM through an application standardized by the GSMA called IoT Safe, which enables the repository of keys and retrieval of these computations, crypto functions, using the keys that are remaining in the secure environment. So this IoT Safe is an application that resides on top of the SIM operating system, or the UICC operating system. It's available integrated or external, as I mentioned. And at Mobile World Congress 21, so earlier this year, we announced, at Keegan, we announced the Open IoT Safe initiative, which is an initiative to really use the least integration possible for IoT Safe.
i.e. prevent bilateral integrations between all the players, and have an architecture that leverages the technologies of today, PKI certs, X509, and so forth, and use a standard, the enrollment of a secure transport, to actually rotate these certificates from a certificate-loaded manufacturing of the SIM or provisioning of the SIM, and later rotate it so that you don't have to touch again that device to load an operational certificate. You touch it remotely, if I may say. And this, we believe, is going to simplify and accelerate not only IoT security, but IoT by itself. Because there are a number of applications that require that security, but today have to deal with costs to provide that security. And we think that this way, between integrated and IoT safe and the eSIM, those three vectors of disruption of this industry are going to fully accelerate the scaling of secure IoT and therefore cellular IoT in general. Thank you. I'll stop here for the Kigen spiel. And you have here a little bit more about us, but let's go into questions. And Carlos, if you have. Sure.
My life? Yes, perfect. Hello, everyone. I'm going to allow you guys to ask any questions. If you want, just take it to the microphone. Please go ahead. I'm going to start with Jean-Louis. When we talk about eSIM, what is preventing MNOs, operators, from launching eSIM?
I don't think there's really anything preventing MNOs from launching eSIM. The thing with ICs or system on chips is that they have to have an operating system that they have integrated. A lot of them have integrated with us, because Keegan was interested in that space. We're talking mostly LP1. So for a number of the SIM incumbents, they're interested in consumer in big volumes. We're interested in the disruption of the space, and we're coming from the LP1 IoT environment. So for MNOs to integrate and launch integrated SIM, they have to be willing to have their profiles available on that operating system and that form factor. We see that most MNOs are actually ready.
You were talking about performance and security when we're talking, eSIM. But what is the role in eSIM when we're talking really performance and security? What would be the perspective, from a standpoint of the eSIM?
Okay, so you can kind of talk about performance in a couple of different ways. It can be how fast can you perform a task in the system, or how efficient can you actually go through and essentially run through your duty cycles of your application. And the way that we look at it in particular for the way that we are leveraging eSIM in our devices is that since it is integrated in the silicon, and we have then a much higher degree of control over kind of how that operates, we can optimize the entire system in terms of power usage. And we also have at the foundation of eSIM technology, right, it is a very strong secure element that is present in the system. So that also adds to that kind of overall efficiency, is that you have, in addition to better power characteristics, you now have an additional element in there that can handle security aspects of the design. It kind of brings these two things together in a very nice way.
Perfect. Sir?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Gigi Mamaropoulos. I'm with FirstNet. First of all, great session. Thank you. I have a question concerning dual SIM use case via eSIM. As you may know, there are some OEMs want to use multiple SIMs to aggregate the capacity over multiple possibly, right? And then secondly, some customers, say public safety customers, want to use dual SIMs or multiple SIMs for reliability or redundancy or coverage issues, right? To resolve some coverage issues. So do you see any challenges or great opportunities in these dual SIM cases via eSIM? Thank you.
Yeah, I can take that one. When we see actually a number of implementations of eSIM or eUICCs, at least in the IoT space, if you're going to install a meter somewhere, for instance, it's going to be always at the same place. Right? So it's difficult to pick an operator before you know where that meter really is going, because you want to make sure that you have coverage. So typically in the implementations today, you're going to put two profiles from the get-go. So you have one where it's your preferred operator, and then with a fallback mechanism where automatically the eUICC will switch over to that other profile if there's a connectivity loss or low connectivity, which most MNOs understand. If they don't have 100% coverage of the land, they'll accept that there's a small percentage that needs to go to their competition so that they can keep that customer. So this is the way we address these points. So you can have a dual SIM, dual standby, which is something that might not be standardized at some point in the NEP, not sure. But we have already addressed it in a way that I think is satisfactory way. That you can have multiple profiles on board, you can fall back, and you can then, since you always have coverage, you can always download another profile as well if you need to.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned about dual SIM, dual standby. What about dual SIM, dual active?
Yeah.
Oh.
I think that's an MVP, right?
MVP?
Yeah, multiple enabled profile.
Yes.
Yes. But it's not standardized.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody has another question before I jump in? Just to be sure. Now, Nick, yeah? You were mentioning, talking about eSIM and, that it will target IoT devices. Now, what do you think are the next steps to be able to really, enable and accelerate eSIM and iSIM? What is it?
It's a good question. So from our perspective, and from Keegan's perspective, as Jean-Louis said, I think we're ready to go. We have everything done. Obviously, we're working through some of the GSMA certifications, which should happen here in the coming month and a half. We should be closed. That is the first hindrance for us. Previously, the hindrance had been, when you asked Jean-Louis the question about operators, right? I think the biggest issue and concern that the operators had initially was related to their security. Security of their SIM, security of everything. And what we did is we went and built an IP from the ground up with our partner. That is EAL 5+ certified. I can tell you that the certification that we have, or the encryption that we have, is higher than what is available today on plastic SIM cards. So we have removed that barrier completely that talks about, the security aspect of it. We now have operators like AT&T and others actually saying, okay, you have something that is secure enough, that is good enough, that can move forward. So that barrier is gone. I think the only barrier that remains is, as I said, getting the GSMA certification first, which takes the next step with the operators. And then the final step is really getting all the operators to kind of work together and be able to move this ecosystem a little bit faster. I think one of the challenges we've had is, really the operators have been a little bit slow in adoption of the integrated SIM technology. So what we really need to do is push that forward. And from our side, what we're starting to do is we're working with some of the leading operators. We're starting to do some demos, some trials, some things like that. And we need to get them a little more comfortable with the technology. We need to have these things in their hands so that they can do their own testing. They can do their own validation. They can actually see the thing works. They can see the thing is secure. The thing is not going to break their network. It cannot be bypassed. It cannot be hacked. And as they tend to get a little more comfortable with this technology over the next few months, I think you'll start to see more confidence come from these operators, and we should be able to move past that hurdle. Obviously, getting them to obviously work with us in terms of getting blobs is something we'll have to work also, but I think that's a challenge we leave with Jean-Louis to help us with.
Yeah.
Jean-Louis, I mean, one last comment that I would like to get from you. Do you think that the section of services will affect that, you know, where the ecosystem comes and says, I need this now, I want to enable devices, like we're saying, you think that will get the progress faster?
I think, yeah, if you have commercial opportunities, they can move faster. But you know, the end-to-end RSP is a complicated infrastructure to set in place. And so they've done it for the automotive industry. They're doing it again for other types of IoT devices. But it takes time to do all this integration. And when it comes to the integrated form factor, they have a system right now to overlay things. They have a system to certify modules and devices, and they're finding ways to now deal with both. But it's still learning progress. So it will take a few months, I think, by the time the first certification comes for sequence and then added shortly thereafter. I think the MNOs will be ready to go, and they're just waiting for your customers to really get it together. Yeah.
Any last comments, gentlemen, before we?
Thank you, Carlos.
Thank you, guys, and we're exactly on 0.
Oh, perfect. Thank you very much.